Ladies and gentlemen, have a seat. Back on the record, State of Ohio versus Lindsay Partin. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, any issues that need to be reported? All right, very good. At this point, we are getting ready to begin the cross-examination. Ms. Howard, you may proceed whenever you are ready.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good morning.
Good morning.
We've never met.
No, ma'am.
Melinda Cook Howard, counsel for Ms.
Weston.
Partin. Sorry you're here today.
Thank you.
Is it okay if I call you Jason?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Hannah had hepatitis C, is that correct?
I was not aware of that.
You weren't aware of the pediatrician records indicating she had hepatitis C?
We had her tested at birth, and it came up negative, and she was retested, I want to say around 9 months, 10 months, and no, I was not aware that she had hepatitis C. I know her mother was hepatitis C positive, but I was not aware Hannah was hepatitis C positive, no.
Were you the sole caregiver taking Hannah to and from the pediatrician?
Yes, ma'am.
And you would agree with me that within those records, if the doctor indicated she had onset of hepatitis C in September of her birth year, that she had hepatitis C?
Yes, ma'am.
And you didn't tell Lindsay about that, or even TJ Smith, correct?
I was not aware of that, no.
On Tuesday, March 6th, Lindsay told you about the fall in the gravel, is that correct?
She did tell me about the fall on the gravel, yes, ma'am.
And Hannah confirmed that to you, isn't that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Approach. Ms. Howard, proceed, please.
Thank you. Jason, I'll ask you the question again. Hannah told you the same thing, that she fell in the gravel, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Do you remember telling the detectives that you had given Hannah a bath and saw a bruise on her?
Yes, ma'am.
And do you remember asking Hannah about that bruise?
I'm not sure what specific bruise you're talking about. If I saw bruises on Hannah, I did ask Hannah.
Okay. Do you recall telling the detectives that you saw a bruise on her butt cheek?
Yes.
Okay. And that you asked Hannah what that was from?
Yes, ma'am.
And she said she fell on the step?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And would you agree with me that you also told the detectives that Hannah never says that Lindsay whoops her or beats her or is rough with her, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And you had given Hannah a bath 2 nights before the 8th of March, is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And is that when you saw the bruise?
Yes, ma'am.
And do you recall describing the bruise at all to the detectives?
No, ma'am, I do not.
You don't recall specifically advising the detectives that it was a bruise on her butt cheek, and I'm using those words directly, butt cheek.
From the bath, yes, I did talk about the bruise on her butt cheek.
Okay, and today here you've described or pointed out a bruise that you would agree with me is above the butt cheek, is actually on the area above that, correct?
Yes.
So, Mr. Wesche, did you see both of those 2 bruises?
I don't believe I did.
Okay, so is it that you saw the bruise on the butt cheek as you described it to the detectives?
The scrape on the bruise that was scraped is what I saw.
Okay, and I'm going to show you what you previously identified as State's Exhibit 66. Do you recognize that to be the same photograph that the prosecutor showed you?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, I'm going to publish that. Just 1 second, thank you.
Ms. Wilson.
I thought I got it right, but I'm sure I didn't.
That's all right.
It was previously on the computer, which is why it's... I'm trying to put this up on the screen versus it was going through her computer system. Okay. Would you agree with me, Jason, that this would be her butt cheek?
Yes, ma'am.
and that would be a bruise, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
So you were incorrect in your testimony to the prosecutor on direct that you saw this scrape at the top. Is that fair to say?
Where your finger is at right now, that is the bruise I was talking about on top of her butt cheek.
Okay, and that's not how you'd agree with me that that's not how you described it
Yes, ma'am.
to the detectives?
Yes, ma'am.
And you would agree with me that the way in which you described it to the detectives was a bruise, not a scrape, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And you'd agree with me that just a couple minutes ago or 30 seconds ago, you identified that this was a scrape, not a bruise, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. Do you recall telling both the hospitals, meaning Fort Hamilton, as well as Children's Hospital, and the detectives that you spoke with that Hannah had been complaining of a headache for 3 weeks?
Off and on.
Okay. Do you remember telling the detectives that?
I did tell them that, yes, ma'am.
And telling the hospital that?
Yes, ma'am.
And as it relates to the left eye injury, do you remember describing that as a little black eye but nothing bad?
I didn't think it was hospital bad. She had a black eye. It did look like the handlebar hit her face.
Okay. So my question is, do you remember telling the detectives this exact phrasing? Gave her a little black eye but nothing bad. Do you remember that phrasing that you used?
I don't recall my exact phrasing, no, ma'am.
Okay. And when you were talking to the detectives at Fort Hamilton Hughes, you'd agree with me that that was being recorded, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, and you knew it was being recorded?
Yes, ma'am.
So if I told you that the transcript says, gave her a little black eye but nothing bad, do you have any reason to disagree with me?
No, if that's what it says, if that's what I said, then I agree with you.
You testified on direct that you believed that the medical condition for Hannah was an aneurysm. Do you recall that testimony?
Yes, ma'am.
And that's what you told Ms. Partin, isn't it?
Yes, that's what I thought it was.
Okay. And did you tell her that both at Fort Hamilton Hospital as well as when she was down there for the evening at Children's Hospital?
Yes, ma'am.
When you were at Children's Hospital, did you advise the Children's Hospital staff that Hannah had been in the ICU at birth for those number of days?
I'm not sure if I did or not. I can't recall.
I apologize, I'm going to go back to the bruise on her butt cheek. Do you recall specifically asking Hannah if she'd got whooped, that was the result of that particular bruise?
No.
And do you recall giving a history at the hospital and Children's Hospital with those words at all?
About her being whooped? I don't recall that, no, ma'am.
You don't recall telling her, Reagan Kitzmeyer, the social worker that you spoke to that day and gave a history?
No, ma'am, I don't recall that.
So you don't recall saying that when you gave her a bath and saw that bruise, that you asked her if she got whooped, and instead Hannah said she'd fallen on a step?
I don't recall that. It's possible. I was under a lot of stress at that time. I'm not sure.
Understandable. You recall telling the social worker that you had no concerns about Lindsay Partin as a caregiver for your child?
Yes, ma'am. I'm sure I said that.
Have you ever met Detective Turner?
Not until this happened, no, ma'am.
Let me rephrase that. As we sit here today on April 9th of 2019, have you ever met Detective Turner?
Yes, ma'am.
When did you meet him?
On March 8th, 2018.
You met him on March 8th?
Yes, ma'am.
Where did you meet him at?
I'm not sure. It was at one of the hospitals. It was either Fort Hamilton or it was at Children's.
Okay.
I talked to a lot of detectives, so I'm not sure when Mr. Turner came into.
Did you go down to the Hamilton, I'm sorry, it's not, it's Hamilton, but it's Butler County Sheriff's Department. Did you have an audio recorded statement with Detective Turner?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Could you be confused with maybe Detective Tanner or Detective Ventry or Detective Sprague or Detective any other name?
It's possible. I know I did go to the Butler County Sheriff's Department and have a meeting with Mr. Turner.
Okay. When was the last time you had a meeting with Detective Turner?
I cannot remember off the top of my head. It was quite a while ago.
Would you agree with me that today is the first time you've told Detective Turner in this room that you didn't go get milk the night before, but instead you went to Fairfield?
No, ma'am.
When did you previously tell him that?
When I found out, Monday morning when we were in court.
Monday morning here in court?
Yes, ma'am.
So today being Tuesday the 9th, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
So Monday, April 1st.
Yes, ma'am.
And you told him that when?
Yesterday. I found out Sunday, this past Sunday, and I told him that yesterday when I was in court.
You told him that like out in the hallway?
Out in the hall, yes, ma'am.
Okay. And so it doesn't have anything to do with the fact that in opening arguments, I indicated that your whereabouts for the night of the 7th of March were very important and suspicious. Doesn't have anything to do with that?
No, ma'am.
Zero.
Nope.
And it's not just all of a sudden my friend Chris, is it Chris who stayed the night?
Christopher Davis, yes.
Yeah. All of a sudden my friend Chris stayed the night and I was driving him home on the 7th.
Yes, ma'am.
So you agree with me that you told the milk story, that you went to Walmart to get milk. You agree with me that you told that to the detectives at Fort Hamilton Hughes, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
You told, again, that same story, that I went to Walmart to get milk on the evening of the 7th to the detectives at Children's Hospital, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And you told that again to the social worker at Children's Hospital, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And then all of a sudden, now you know, oh my gosh, my friend Chris was over the last night my daughter was alive in my house, and now I remember that I drove him to Fairfield. Is that what you're telling this jury?
Yes, ma'am.
That's what you're telling this jury. Is it because you talked to your daughter, Caitlin, and she told you that she knew Chris stayed there? Is that why you're coming up with Chris now?
No, ma'am.
You didn't have that conversation with Caitlin at all?
No, ma'am.
I'm going to show you what was previously marked as Defendant's Exhibit J12 and J13. Ask you first if you recognize those photographs.
Yes, ma'am.
You've had an opportunity, is it fair to say, to look at all of the photographs of 4004 Shank Road taken by the detectives?
Yeah, I believe so, yes, ma'am.
And you'd agree with me that those are a photograph of a suitcase in Hannah's room found by them on March 8th, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And would you agree with me that that's the suitcase of your friend Chris?
Yes, ma'am.
So if you took him home on the evening of the 7th, why is his suitcase still there?
He forgot it.
And when did you remember that?
That he forgot it?
Yeah.
Well, I knew he forgot it when I saw the suitcase in the pictures.
Okay, so when did you first see the pictures?
On the 25th, I believe, when I met with Miss Hiley
The 25th of which month?
of March.
Of 2018?
Yes, ma'am.
So isn't it fair to say that on March 25th of 2018, you knew you had not gone to get milk? You knew Chris had been there overnight, correct?
I knew his suitcase was there. No, ma'am, I did not realize that he stayed there the night before.
But just conveniently now you remember.
I remembered after I had that discussion with him, yes, ma'am.
Did you look through your phone at all to check texts and figure out what you'd done on those last few days?
No, ma'am, I wasn't worried about that. I was worried about my daughter.
You were worried, actually, because you know that the detectives are looking at you or Lindsay Partin. It's one of you, correct?
Correct.
And so you lied to the police about your whereabouts on the last night of Hannah's life, correct?
Correct.
You lied about who was present with Hannah.
Correct.
And so there's a third person. it's not just maybe Lindsay or you. It's maybe Chris, too.
No, ma'am.
What's Chris's last name?
Davis?
And did you tell that to the detective?
No, ma'am.
Did you just call him your friend?
I may have said Chris. I didn't go over any specifics. It was a very brief conversation. We didn't get into detail.
Because you hadn't made up the specifics yet. Is that fair to say?
No, ma'am.
You hadn't been told the specifics yet. Is that fair to say?
No, ma'am.
Is Chris in the courtroom?
No, he is not.
Has he been here at all for any of the trial days?
No, ma'am. He doesn't drive and he lives in Lebanon now.
So where did he live in Fairfield?
At Cobblestone Apartments,
And you estimate that that took you an hour and 15 minutes round trip?
ballpark. It takes 30 minutes from Shank Road to Cobblestone.
And what did you do at Chris's apartment?
I dropped him off.
And you just remember that after you talked to Chris?
Yes, ma'am.
Do you agree with me, Jason, that a person's memory would be better closer in time to the event than a year and 1 month later?
Yes, ma'am.
You were aware that as of Monday, April 1st, in this trial, timing is pretty important, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Where Hannah was, who she was with, in the 24 hours immediately preceding the EMTs coming to her, that's a pretty important time.
Yes, ma'am.
Did you consent to have your phone searched?
I'm not sure if I was asked or not.
Well, my question was, did you consent?
I did not consent. If somebody asked, I would have consented, yes.
Okay, so if they didn't ask, you didn't volunteer it.
No.
And to your knowledge, have they being the detectives, presented you with phone records from search warrants conducted on your phone through your cell phone carrier?
I'm not sure if they had my phone records or not. I know they had phone records from Lindsay. I'm not sure if they had mine or not.
They've shown you the phone records from Lindsay, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
When did you first see those?
On the 25th
Of which month?
of March.
March 25th of 2019?
Yes, ma'am.
So, 2 weeks ago?
Yes, ma'am.
The Monday prior to trial starting?
Yes, ma'am.
Is that when you identified Exhibit 128 with the phone records that Ms. Hiley previously showed you?
No, ma'am.
So when had you identified those?
My calls?
Yes.
Just now.
That's the first time you saw that?
I saw the phone records, but we didn't go through the phone records. I didn't sit there and read the phone records.
What does I
saw
saw
the
the phone
pictures.
records, but I didn't go through them mean? What
Because
does that mean?
there was a whole folder of evidence. I assume it was evidence. She had the pictures in that folder. There was phone records in that folder. I did identify my phone number on the phone records, but I didn't specifically go through record by record on the phone records.
Would you agree with me that you estimated that it took you 3 minutes to get out the door after you texted Lindsay?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So if the specific time of the text is 6:52 and 17 seconds, and then Lindsay texts you back at 6:52 and 55 seconds, you would agree with me that it took you about 3 minutes to get out the door?
And over to Lindsay's, yes, ma'am.
You indicated, Mr. Weshy, that you knew that the police were tape recording your statements, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
I'm going to show counsel first. Defendant's Exhibit QQ, so quarter. So you recall that that interview was tape recorded, both of them?
Yes, ma'am.
And not video recorded, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Because you were at the hospital for both of those, is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
You had one first at Fort Hamilton Hughes,
Yes, ma'am.
and then the second one at Children's Hospital, is that fair to say?
Yes, ma'am. I talked to him quite a bit at Children's Hospital.
Okay. And do you believe that all of your talking to the detectives were recorded, or just one?
I'm not sure. I'd see him in the hallway a lot. I was there for the whole 10 days she was in there, so I was there quite a bit.
I'm going to approach the witness with QQ.
You may.
Direct your attention to page 8. Line 11 through 13. Ask you to read that to yourself.
Okay.
Okay. Does that refresh your memory that you told the detectives, I was getting ready to leave my house and I was still putting my boots on and stuff? So I probably walked out the door at 6:55?
I don't recall that, but I mean, yes, I did say that.
If your friend Chris told you that this is what you said, would you believe that then?
No, ma'am. I'm not saying I didn't say it. It obviously, yes, ma'am.
And you'd agree with me that you told the detectives that Hannah put her own coat on, you remember that?
Yes, ma'am.
And you told the detectives that prior to putting her coat on, you and she went into the bathroom and brushed her teeth and brushed her hair, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
But isn't her hairbrush laying on the dining room table in the front room?
There's quite a few hairbrushes. I have all girls. I'm not sure.
I'm going to show you what I've marked as Exhibit Y as in year, 1 through 5. Ask you to look at Exhibits 1 through 5. Do you recognize the photographs contained in 1 through 5?
Yes, ma'am.
What are they?
They're of my house.
Do they appear to be a true and accurate depiction of your house on March 8th?
Yes, ma'am.
You previously had identified at least one of these photographs when the prosecutor showed you some photographs of the bathroom. Is that fair to say?
Yes, ma'am.
Asked to publish.
State.
No objection.
That'll be a minute, you may publish.
I'm going to put them on in order. You agree with me, Mr. Weshy, that that is your bathroom, is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And can you see a brush in that room?
I do not.
Y2, do you see a brush underneath the sink?
No, ma'am.
Y3? Sorry, no. Do you see a brush in that photograph?
No, ma'am.
Y4? Do you see a brush in that photograph?
No, ma'am.
Y5? Do you see a brush in that photograph?
No, ma'am.
I'm going to show you what I've marked as Z as in zebra 1 through 7 after I've shown the prosecutor. You may approach.
That'll be a minute, you may publish as well.
1 second. I'll keep track of my one. Showing you what's marked as zebra 1 through 6. Ask you to look through those 6 photographs, please. Do you recognize those photographs, sir?
Yes, ma'am.
Those appear to be your living room as it was left on March 8th.
Yes, ma'am.
Jason, is it fair to say that when you picked up, when you picked up Hannah on the 7th, you strapped her right into her car seat when you got her out of the house from Lindsay, correct?
I cannot recall. I'm not sure if I did or not. If I was leaving directly from there, I would have, but if I was just going to my house, no, I would not have.
Okay, well, you just told this jury that you went back to the house and picked up Chris who'd stayed the night, so which one was it?
I understand I did, but I don't know if I didn't stop at my house. If I didn't stop at my house, then I didn't strap her in.
Where was Chris at?
At my house.
How would he have gotten in the car?
Well, because I can pull in the driveway and he can come out of the door and get in my car.
But Chris didn't tell you what the memory of that was?
No, I didn't know.
Exhibit Z1. Your living room, is that fair to say?
Yes, ma'am.
Z2. The coffee table in the front room?
Yes, ma'am.
You see the brush in that photograph?
Yes, ma'am.
Z3. You recognize that photograph?
Yes, ma'am.
See the brush?
Yes, ma'am.
That's the same brush from the photograph before, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Z4, just a farther back photograph, is that fair to say?
Yes, ma'am.
Z5, does that appear to be your house?
Yes, ma'am.
And this is your bedroom door?
Yes, ma'am.
Do you recall telling Lindsay Partin previously that Hannah had locked you out of your bedroom one time?
Yes, ma'am.
And that she was a little mischievous about it?
She was.
And you used that word with her, hadn't you?
Yes, ma'am. She was mischievous.
And you described her various things that she had done before, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And Z6? Do you recognize that to be the top of the, I guess that's the fireplace?
Yes, ma'am.
Show you what was previously marked as AA 1 through 22. There are 22 photographs here, if you would look through those, please. Have you had the opportunity to review those?
Yes, ma'am.
Do those appear to be a fair and accurate depiction of your house?
Yes.
Specifically the kitchen area on March 8th of 2018?
Yes, ma'am.
Ask the publisher in a minute. Go, Jeff.
All right.
Thank you.
AA 1 through 22.
Yes, Your Honor, thank you. A1. That's your kitchen area, correct?
I'm sorry.
Yes, ma'am.
I'm sorry, AA1, thank you for correcting me. I believe this is similar to a photograph that Ms. Hiley had you identify, is that fair to say?
Yes, ma'am.
Shows the back door of your house, is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And the refrigerator, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Is that your computer on the table?
Yes, ma'am.
AA2 appears to be a close-up of the sink area, kitchen sink area, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
AA3, another angle opposite of AA1, looking the other direction towards the stove, is that fair to say?
Yes, ma'am.
And this would be the doorway back to the living room, correct?
Yes,
The
ma'am.
entryway, I guess I'd call it.
Yes.
Okay. AA4, the computer.
Yes, ma'am.
What is over here to the right?
That
Battery charger?
is, yeah, it's a rechargeable batteries for the Xbox remote controls. Energizer charger. It charges AA batteries and AAA batteries.
AA5, inside of your oven.
Yes, ma'am.
AA6, above the stove.
Yes, ma'am.
AA7. Is that above the stove?
No, I think that's above the sink.
Okay. AA8,
Yes, ma'am.
is that to the side of the stove? I apologize, side of the sink?
Yes, ma'am, side of the sink.
You can see that that's the cabinet right there that we just pointed to?
Yes, ma'am.
Is that fair to say?
Yes.
And AA8 is a closer up of the sink and stove area, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
AA10 is where you keep your food, is that fair to say?
Yes, ma'am.
I don't see any cereal in there, do you?
No, ma'am.
Bottom cabinet with pans, AA11, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
AA12, another bottom cabinet with miscellaneous kitchen appliances.
Yes, ma'am.
AA13, a drawer
Yes, ma'am.
with paper bags in it, I'm sorry, plastic bags.
Plastic, yeah, it was the plastic bags.
AA14, utensil drawer next to the stove.
Yes, ma'am.
AA15, just an empty drawer.
Yes, ma'am.
AA16, spoons and forks and knives drawer.
Yes, ma'am.
AA16, I'm sorry, AA17, cup cupboard, is that fair to say?
Yes, ma'am.
AA18, where you keep your plates.
Yes, ma'am.
Is this the microwave here?
Yes, ma'am.
Cabinet all the way to the left above the washer dryer, is that fair to say?
Yes, ma'am.
And that was AA19. AA20, underneath the sink.
Yes,
correct?
ma'am.
AA21, inside of your fridge,
Yes, ma'am.
correct? You don't
Yes.
see any milk in that side of the fridge, do you?
No, ma'am.
AA22, the inside of your fridge, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
You don't see any milk in there either.
No, ma'am.
Do you recall speaking with Detective Turner on the telephone on or about March 10th, where he asked you about the milk?
Yes, ma'am.
Do you recall Detective Turner advising you in that telephone call on or about March 10th that the detectives in the Butler County Sheriff's Department had investigated and looked to see if there were any videos for you at Walmart buying milk the evening of the 7th? Do you recall that?
Yes, ma'am.
And that's when you told him you must have been mistaken, you didn't buy milk, correct?
No, I didn't know that I didn't buy milk until I had him look at the pictures or open my refrigerator. I didn't realize that I didn't buy milk until I was told.
Okay, so in that conversation, which occurred on or about March 10th, you didn't remember that you'd been to Fairfield on the evening of the 7th?
No, ma'am.
Did he ask where you were instead?
I told him I went back home. If I didn't have milk, I assumed I went back home.
So on March 10th, on or about, you didn't even remember you drove all the way to Fairfield to drop your friend Chris off, correct?
No, ma'am.
If the witnesses indicate that you were actually not home at 10 o'clock, would you agree with them?
No, ma'am.
You think you were home?
By 10 o'clock, yes, ma'am.
Well, you told the detectives and you told the social worker that you were pretty clear that you went to Walmart for milk, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And you told the detectives and the social worker that you were pretty clear and pretty certain that you guys were home, Hannah went and played in her room, and then you all fell asleep on the couch, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
So now it's pretty clear, as of at least this week, you know you weren't home, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
So the whole time frame that you gave the detectives that you were home and asleep on the couch at 8 o'clock, maybe 8:30. That's not true, correct?
No, ma'am. I was
And-
probably on the couch by 8:30.
Move to strike, non-responsive.
Your Honor, if I may address that.
Yeah, let's do it. All right, the request strike will be denied. Ms. Howard, you may proceed.
Do you find it odd that you didn't remember about Chris until just last week?
No, ma'am.
I'm going to show you what was previously admitted as Exhibit J1. Asked to publish, it's already been admitted.
Yeah, I don't think it'd be J1 straight, it's already been in J1.
I'm gonna go through J.
All right, go ahead.
You recognize that as Hannah's room?
Yes, ma'am.
This is the room that you told the detectives and the social worker that Hannah went to play in for 10 minutes after you arrived home at 7 o'clock. Do you remember that?
Yes, ma'am.
That was a lie, correct?
We did not go home. I left, so yes, that she did not go in and play at 7 o'clock.
And there aren't any toys in there, right?
Not too many.
I see a clown in picture 1, correct?
Mhm. Yes, ma'am.
In J2, I see a naked baby doll, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And maybe a Mickey Mouse stuffed animal.
A Minnie Mouse, yes, ma'am.
That'd be the extent of the toys, correct?
There's a few more there than that, but yes, she didn't have many toys.
I'm going to hand you the rest of the exhibits, J3 through 11. If you could find the other toys that you're speaking about, I'd like you to point them out to me, and then I'll show that photograph.
Well, there's there's toys in all the photographs except for 2 of them, ma'am.
Could you identify which number you looked at that you see other toys than the 3 toys that we identified in the first 2 photographs?
Yes, ma'am. J8.
Okay? If you could hand that to me. Thank you.
J5. J6. J10. This is pretty much, J11 is pretty much the same photo. And then, I can't see anything in that one.
So you've identified 5 photographs, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
J10. Is this the toy you refer to, this yellow and green?
Yes, ma'am.
What is that?
I'm not sure exactly what it is. It's like a dinosaur. She fits her little shapes through the top. It's a triangle, a square, and a circle, and her little blocks she can put through there.
In the 10 minutes you told the detective she'd been playing in her room that night, was she playing with that toy?
I'm not sure.
I thought you just said she didn't play in her room for 10 minutes.
At 7 o'clock, no, because we weren't there.
So she did play in her room.
She may have went in the room when we got back.
Is that a may or she did?
I'm not 100% sure.
She didn't go back at 8 o'clock. Is that true?
No, that's not true.
She wasn't there at 8:30. Isn't that true?
No, ma'am, that's not true.
You and Hannah were out pretty late
No.
on the 7th of March.
No, ma'am.
You weren't with Chris?
I dropped Chris off at his apartment, and I came right back home. We were not out late.
Really?
Really.
J11, that same toy that you're talking about?
Yes, ma'am.
J8, the same toy, the shapes?
Well, and you got the fireman doll down here on the right next to
Oh,
the
I
naked
called that a
baby
clown,
doll.
I apologize.
Oh, okay.
So the clown and the naked baby doll that we already identified?
Yes.
That's 3 of the photographs. So we've got an additional toy.
And there's also a stuffed animal under that TV stand as well. It's a pink teddy bear that she used to play with. That was another one.
Underneath where Chris's suitcase is?
Yes, ma'am. Down at the bottom, on the bottom shelf.
Right here?
and there's another toy next to it. I'm not sure exactly which one that is. And it looked like in that picture there was another toy behind that box as well.
Are you telling me that your 3-year-old daughter climbed behind that box?
It's an empty box. Our hot water heater went out, and that was the box that came in a new hot water heater, and she liked to play with the box, so I kept it. She would climb inside of it and play with it. It was like her little fort.
Did she climb in it that night of the 7th?
Not that I'm aware. It's sitting up. She couldn't climb in it sitting up.
J5 appears to be the closet, is that fair to say?
Yes, ma'am.
You point to this toy, is that what you were identifying?
Yes, ma'am.
Back to J4. You see the mattress laying there,
Yes, ma'am.
covering that up?
Yes, ma'am.
Did Hannah crawl into that closet and play with that pink toy?
Hannah put the mattress. She put the mattress in her closet when she's playing with the box. She lays
Hannah
that box.
put the mattress in the closet?
It's not a very heavy mattress. It's only about a 4-foot long mattress.
Your
My
3-year-old
3-year-old
child
can move that mattress.
moved
Yes,
that
ma'am.
mattress.
Yes, ma'am.
Did she get hurt doing that?
No, ma'am. It's a crib mattress, so it's not a very big mattress.
And I think I showed you J5. That's the same toy that you say that she was playing with.
I'm not saying she was playing with it. I'm saying that was one of her toys.
Did you hear her in there for 10 minutes?
No, ma'am.
Did you stop at the house first and she played in her room for 10 minutes and then you took took Chris home?
I don't believe so, but I cannot recall.
Chris didn't tell you that,
No.
so you don't have a memory of that.
I didn't ask him. It's not about what Chris tells me.
And then the last toy you identified, J6. Would you agree with me that Hannah can't reach that shelf, correct?
Correct.
That's the top shelf in a closet.
Yes, ma'am.
She's not in there by herself playing with that,
Correct.
You told the story of playing in the room by herself to several people, correct?
I'm not sure if I did.
The doctors at Children's Hospital?
Yes, ma'am.
The detectives at Children's Hospital?
Yes, ma'am.
The detectives at Fort Hamilton?
Yes, ma'am.
In terms of the weather that day, do you recall it being cold on March 8th?
Yes, ma'am.
And you were going to be working outside all day that day? Would that be fair to say?
Yes, ma'am.
Do you recall the days preceding March 8th having difficulty at work?
I had one accident at work with a trailer. Yes, ma'am.
You recall that occurring on Tuesday, correct?
I want to say it was on Wednesday. I believe that was Wednesday on the 8th.
We'll come back. On the what?
I believe that was Wednesday on the 7th, on March 7th.
You recall the trailer incident being that you failed to secure the trailer and it rolled down a hill in Kentucky on Highway 8, is that correct?
I parked the trailer on the hill. I chalked the wheels, and another one of our employees took the truck and backed into the trailer. It went up over the chalks and down the hill. Yes, ma'am.
You recall almost being fired on the night of the trailer incident?
Yes, ma'am.
And then there was another incident the day after in regards to the Mexican. Do you remember that?
Yes, ma'am.
So 2 days in a row you had the possibility of being fired, correct?
No, the incident with the Hispanic gentleman, nobody ever said anything about being fired. We just had some words.
TJ Smith didn't tell you if it's between you and him, he's keeping the Mexican because he's been his employee for a long period of time? You don't remember that conversation?
He said if he decided to quit, then yes, I would be the one to go.
So you knew 2 nights in a row that you were going to lose your job if you didn't get your stuff together, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And so on the morning of the 8th of March, you knew you needed to be on time, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And you're supposed to be at your truck ready to go at 7, isn't that correct?
I get to my truck and start it at 7 a.m. Yes, ma'am.
That's what Smith Construction expects of you as an employee, that you are ready to go at 7, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And so you weren't ready to go at 7, correct?
Yes, I was.
You were running late that morning, weren't you?
I may have been a minute late or so. Yes, ma'am.
And if you're a minute late or so, you'd agree with me that you told Detective Lambert, one second. You specifically told Lambert that you weren't at your truck. Do you remember that?
No, ma'am.
You don't specifically recall telling Detective Lambert that you were driving to the shop located at the end of Shank Road when Lindsay called him to respond back to the house due to Hannah not breathing?
No, ma'am. It was right after I started my truck.
So if you talked to Detective Lambert at Fort Hamilton Hospital, you'd agree with me on that?
I don't recall saying that to her, no.
Do you recall talking to Detective Lambert and
Yes, ma'am.
Detective Sprague at Fort Hamilton Hospital?
I talked to a couple of detectives. I'm not sure which ones they were.
Was one of them a female?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And if I told you that the only female detective that you spoke to was Detective Lambert, do you have any reason to disagree with me?
No.
So you don't specifically recall telling Detective Lambert that you were driving to the shop located at the end of Shank Road when you got that call?
No, ma'am. I don't.
If Chris told you that that was your statement, would you agree with him?
No, ma'am. I know exactly what I was doing that morning.
You know
when I got that phone
today,
call.
it's very important about timing, isn't that true?
I know exactly what I was doing when I got that phone call. I was at my truck.
But you told Detective Lambert something different.
I don't recall saying that to her.
So if she came in here and already testified to that, she'd be lying or you would be lying?
If it's in there, maybe I did. Again, I'm not sure. I can't say what my mind was going through. I was more worried about my daughter.
You weren't at your truck yet, correct?
I was at my truck.
There was snow on the ground, correct?
Yes.
That means
Was there
there was
snow
snow
on
on your car when you got out to your car, correct?
If there was snow, and yes, there was snow on my car.
And so you get your daughter out of the house, you've got a jacket on her, you've got a blanket on her, she gets in the car. Does she get in the car by herself?
I put her in the front seat and she climbed into the back. She laid in the back seat on the way to Lindsay's house.
Okay, so in addition to getting your boots on, getting the coat on, getting your coat on, and getting her out the door, which you said took about 3 minutes, now you've got to get her blanket and put her in the front seat, correct?
Her blanket I have in my hand. I just toss it over when I pick her up and put her on my shoulder.
Correct?
I
So
have-
now we're about 6:56, correct?
No, not correct.
Doesn't take you a minute to get your 3-year-old child into the car?
When I walk up to the car and open the door, I set her in the car. I don't strap her in the car seat when we're going to Lindsay. So no, I didn't take the extra time to strap her in the car seat. I set her right in the car and we went to Lindsay's.
How long does it take you to get out the door?
A second. I mean, when I walk out the door, I just
1
walk out
second.
the door. Maybe 30 seconds?
Okay, so we're at 6:56 and 30 seconds when you get Hannah to the car. You put her in the front seat, is what you're saying, correct?
No, no,
Is that
ma'am.
what you're saying?
No, ma'am.
You didn't put her in the front seat.
That's not what I'm saying either. I'm saying your timing's wrong. You're trying to twist my words.
I'm not trying to twist your
When
words.
I-
You told us
when I
it was
text Lindsay-
6:55 when you left the house. Do you recall that?
When I text Lindsay at 6:52, I was getting ready to walk out the door. So no, I'm not saying I sat there for another 3 minutes. No, ma'am, that is not correct.
Do you recall me asking you about this exhibit? Exhibit double Q?
Yes, ma'am.
Specifically, line 11 through 13, page
Yes,
8?
ma'am.
Do you remember that?
Yes, I do.
And you remember telling the detectives, I probably walked out the door at 6:55, do you recall that?
Yes, ma'am. I don't recall telling them that, but if it is in the writing, I'm sure
Well,
I
I'll
did.
show it to you again, do you want to see it?
No, I believe you. I saw it. I read it.
So if you walked out the door at 6:55, 30 seconds to walk from your front door to your car that's parked in the driveway, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Open the front passenger side for Hannah?
Driver's side.
So you walk all the way around the car and put her in through the driver's side?
No, I don't walk around the car. When I pull up through my driveway to my front porch, when I walk out, I'm already in front of my car. Usually if I put her in the front, when I get in, she climbs on my seat and she'll climb in between.
You're parked nose in into the drive, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
So the closest door to your front door of your car is the passenger side, correct?
When I'm carrying Hannah and I walk out.
Listen to me. That's my question. Your car is nose in,
Yes, ma'am.
correct?
Yes, ma'am.
You don't park in that little garage, correct?
No, ma'am.
Your car's outside, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
You would agree with me that the closest door from your front door to the car is the passenger side,
Yes,
correct?
ma'am.
That was my question.
Yes, ma'am.
So now you're telling the jury that you didn't put her in the passenger seat door, you walked around to the driver's side. Is that what you're saying?
I didn't have to walk around. I walked right in front of my car and we got in the driver's side. Yes, ma'am. I did not come out and go to the passenger side. I walked out, walked in front of my car, opened my driver's door, and we got in the car.
30 seconds, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And you've already agreed with me that it was cold that day. You probably had snow on your car, correct?
Yes.
And you'd agree with me that your car doesn't immediately warm up, correct?
No, ma'am.
It does?
I said, no, ma'am, it does not immediately warm up.
Okay. And so you'd agree with me that you had to wait a little bit for the car to warm up before you put it in reverse, correct?
No, ma'am.
You didn't?
No, ma'am.
You immediately shoved that thing into reverse and got the heck out of the driveway?
Yeah, when I'm leaving for work, yes, ma'am. I started
Is
my
that when
car.
Hannah fell into the back seat and hit her head?
Hannah never fell in the back seat.
Are you certain?
I'm 100% certain.
Because if she fell in the back seat, climbing over the front seat and hit her head, and it killed her, then you'd be responsible. Isn't that true?
I assume I would, yes, ma'am, but Hannah did not
So
fall
that's
in the
why you're
back
pretty
seat.
certain that that's not what happened.
No, ma'am.
So we're at 6:55, 6:56 and 30 seconds? You got to pull out of your driveway, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
That drive's pretty long, isn't it?
No, ma'am.
How far is it?
About from here to the doors, maybe?
Okay. So you're at a dead stop in your car that sat presumably all night long in the cold, and you shoved that thing in reverse. How long does it take you to get out into the main road of Shank?
Maybe 5 seconds?
Because you're driving fast?
No, I'm not driving fast, but it doesn't take me very long to back out of my driveway. My driveway wasn't very long.
You'd agree with me that your driveway has a slight curve to it, correct?
A little bit.
It's not a straight shot, correct?
Right at the top, it curves.
Right at the top where you'd have to turn your car, correct?
I would turn my wheel to leave my driveway, yes, ma'am.
I'm going to show you and put up on the screen for you State's Exhibit 86. Let me orient this. Sorry. You agree with me that this is your house?
Yes, ma'am.
And you agree with me that this is the driveway?
Yes, ma'am.
See how it curves?
Yes, ma'am.
So you're not in a straight, just shove it in reverse. You've got to actually turn the wheel and pay attention to what you're doing, correct?
Yes, ma'am, I
Unless, of
did.
course, your daughter's climbing over the seat, correct?
No, ma'am, she was already in the back seat.
And then you reverse it into this spot, correct?
I backed up onto Shank Road.
Okay. And you'd agree with me that at that time of day, there are other workers coming to Smith Construction, correct? Because you're all supposed to be there by 7.
Well, most of the workers go
Would you
out.
agree with me?
No, ma'am, I would not.
No other workers were heading down to the barn.
I can't say no other workers there, but the majority of the workers that work for that company, no, ma'am, they did not come to the shop. They worked out in the field, so they met their foremans at the job. Most of them did not come to the shop.
So the workers that are coming to the shop, you got to be careful for them. You don't want to back your car into them as they come around the corner, do you?
No, ma'am.
And so you back up, take that curve, and then you head down to Lindsay's, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And this is Lindsay's house?
Yes, ma'am.
And you actually parked here in the main driveway, didn't you?
Yes, ma'am.
So she could see you, correct?
That's just where I pull in when I pull in.
That's her front window that looks outside on the main front driveway, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
So you didn't drive to the back of the house, correct?
No, ma'am.
And I'm going to put up on the screen State's Exhibit 96. You agree with me that that's the house?
Yes,
The
ma'am.
4050 Shank Road?
Yes, ma'am.
And while you can't see it all, this is concrete underneath that van and it extends.
I'm sorry.
There's a concrete drive here that's seen previously in Exhibit 86.
Yes, ma'am.
That's all concrete in the front of those 2 garage doors.
Yes, ma'am.
And that the door that you walk into is actually in the back
Yes,
of the
ma'am.
house.
Yes, ma'am.
So when you pull into that driveway, do you pull in front forward like this minivan?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, stop your car,
Yes.
turn it off.
No, I don't usually turn it off.
You kept it running
Yes, ma'am.
to try to keep it warm.
I just keep it running. I'm on my way to work. I just kept it running.
Kept it running because it was cold, correct?
That's not why I kept it running. Even when it's warm, I kept it running. I'm going right to the shop. I didn't shut my car off.
So now we're at 9:57, 9:50, I'm sorry, 6:57, 6:58 to get you to that driveway?
I don't believe it took me that long to get over there. No, ma'am.
Well, we already established 6:55, correct? 30 more seconds to get out to your car, put Hannah in the front seat on your side, correct? Correct?
Yeah. Yes, ma'am.
So 9:50, I'm sorry, 6:55 and 30 seconds, correct?
Yes.
You said that Hannah got into the back seat. How long did it take her to get into the back seat?
She climbs right back there.
Then why didn't you just put her in the back seat if she's just going to climb into the back seat?
Because I thought she was going to sit up front with me, and
Did
she
she
climbed in the back
fall
seat.
when you pulled the car quickly in the back?
No, ma'am.
So you'd agree with me that you're maybe at, Lindsay's at 6:56, 6:57?
Maybe.
And you'd agree with me that there's at least a 30-second difference from the time you putting Hannah in the car to the time that you back it up? Another 30 seconds?
It doesn't take me 30 seconds to get out of my driveway.
Had to get it started, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Had to let it warm up a little bit because of the snow, correct?
I didn't let it warm up.
You didn't at all?
No.
So you could actually see out your windshield.
I turned my windshield wipers on.
Could you see through the frost that was on your windows?
I don't know.
So we're at 6:56, 6:57. You get over to Lindsay's house, 6:57, 6:58.
About 6:57, somewhere in there, yes, ma'am.
Could be 6:58. You weren't looking at your
I
watch,
wasn't
were
looking at
you?
my watch. No, I was not.
You get out of your car. You said you're parked in this driveway.
Yes,
You
ma'am.
walk around the house, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Putting back Exhibit 86. This is the house.
Yes, ma'am.
You parked in this driveway right here.
Yes, ma'am.
Put a dot on that driveway on your screen, please. Are you parked front in on the driveway?
Front end on the right side of the driveway.
Front in. And so when you, after you dropped off Hannah, you backed up and went down to the shop.
Yes, ma'am.
So when you went here, you got Hannah out of the car. Was she in the back seat, you said?
Yes, ma'am.
And which door did you get her out of?
The driver's side.
Did she open her own door or did you open it for her?
I don't remember.
Another 30 seconds, get her out of the car.
No, ma'am, it doesn't take me 30 seconds to get out of the car. She wasn't seat belted in, so when I opened the door, she got right out of the car. I picked her
So now
up.
you remember opening the door.
Or she opened the door. When the door opened, she got right out of the car. I can't sit here and specifically say if I opened the door, if she opened the door. I think it was me, I'm pretty sure, but I don't want to say for a fact, because it could have been her inside opening the door. I'm not sure.
And you picked her up
Yes, ma'am.
and she's got her coat on, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
She's got her hood up because it's cold.
Yes, ma'am.
And you put the blanket over, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And you carry her in, correct?
Yes, I do.
And you walk to the back of the house, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
The door, point where the door is on the back of the house there.
It is right around there.
Okay. So you'd agree with me, another 30 seconds? Getting her out of the car, getting to the door?
Maybe 30 seconds.
How long do you estimate you are inside the garage at the 4050 Shank Road residence?
Less than a minute. A minute or less. I gave her hugs and kisses.
Wait, you said that she gave you lots of kisses.
She did.
So was it a long goodbye?
It was probably about a minute.
Okay.
Usually I give her a hug and kiss and hand her to Lindsay. And this time it was different. She kept asking me one more kiss, one more kiss, one more kiss. So it may have been about a minute.
So 6:58:30 or 6:59:30?
Somewhere in that range.
And Lindsay calls you at 7 o'clock and 47 seconds, correct?
Yes, that's the phone call I missed.
And just like you told Detective Lambert, you were on your way to the shop when Lindsay called you, correct?
I was in the middle of starting my truck when I missed that first call.
That's not what you told Lambert.
That's what happened.
Are you telling this jury that it only took you 1 minute and 17 seconds to get down to your truck, drive around to the barn, get to the truck, get out of your car, and get into the truck and turn it on? That's what you're saying?
Yes, ma'am.
That it took you less than a minute and 17 seconds?
Yes, ma'am. The shop's not that far from the house. My keys are already in my truck. I pulled up my truck, got out, and started.
So 6:59:30 at the house, 7 o'clock and 47 seconds, missed call. Where do you think you were when that missed call came in?
I was starting my truck behind the shop.
Did you have your phone on you?
That was in my car, that's why I missed your call.
Where was your phone?
Sitting in my seat in my car. When I got out to start my truck, my phone was sitting in my car. When I got back in my car from starting the truck, she immediately called me back.
If I told you that the phone records demonstrate that you actually called Lindsay back, would you agree with me or disagree with me?
I'd have to disagree with you. I'm pretty sure she called me back.
Okay.
I may have seen the missed call and called her back, but I don't think so. I'm pretty sure she called me back.
1 second, please. Do you have that particular exhibit, Ms. Hiley?
It's still with the witness exhibit 128. You have it? Let me see.
1 second, Your Honor.
Take your time.
If you can't find it, I have it. Something.
Well, I don't want to put it in my stuff. Wait, I found it. It was in my stuff. I'm going to show you what the prosecutor previously had to identify as Exhibit 128. Do you recall seeing this particular document?
Yes, ma'am.
Pointing your attention to the page that is identified on the bottom as page number 7637, specifically pointing you to the third entry that's not blacked out. Do you see that?
Yes, ma'am.
Put it up on the screen for you.
Ms. Howard, hold on just a second.
Yeah, I don't know how to clear that off.
Yep. No,
Okay.
that's right. Everybody put your real quick.
Right. Mr. Rush?
See, please.
Thank you, sorry. Jason, you had an opportunity to review 128 for that particular call, is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
You would agree with me that after looking at State's Exhibit 128, that it was in fact you who called Lindsay
Back, yes, ma'am.
at 7:01 and 24 seconds?
Yes, ma'am.
So when her call to you at 7:00 and 47 seconds came in, you're telling this jury that your phone was in your car,
I was starting my truck, yes, ma'am.
even though you told Detective Lambert something different?
Yes, ma'am. I don't remember telling her that, but that's what I was doing. I was starting my truck when I got that first
And you
phone
have a
call.
distinct memory of that, very
Yes.
clear?
Yes, ma'am.
That's what you're saying to this jury today?
Yes, ma'am.
And you know today how important that timing is, don't you?
That's what happened.
You've been made very aware of how important that timing is, haven't you?
Yes, ma'am. I've known this from the beginning since I was in the hospital about the timing.
And I think your testimony was that you had left the truck running.
Yes, ma'am.
Do you recall that?
Yes, ma'am.
So if other witnesses say nobody ever went and turned your truck off, either the truck ran all day long sitting in the back of Smith Construction's pole barn,
I don't know how to answer that. I'm not sure who shut the truck off or if anybody did shut the truck off because I never went back down to the truck.
So if nobody shut the truck off,
Then it
you
ran all
didn't
day
start your
long.
truck, correct?
Oh, I definitely started my truck. It was running when I was down there.
Why didn't you take your truck then? You
Because-
just got a call that your daughter is unconscious.
Yes.
You're telling me that you have the wherewithal of getting in your car because what if I have to go to the hospital? I'm going to need my car. You didn't just jump in that truck. You just started it, put that thing in reverse, and hightailed it up the street. Come on, are you kidding me?
No, I'm not. I didn't call her back until I was in my car. And that truck's a diesel, so you can't just start it and take off like that. I was in my car when I talked to her again, and I put it in drive, and I went back to her house.
The reason you didn't take the truck is because you didn't have the truck started, correct?
No, ma'am. That's false.
Mr. Rushy, you would agree with me that you lied to the police about milk and Walmart, correct?
I was confused, yes, ma'am.
For a whole year and a month.
Yes,
You were
ma'am.
confused.
It is detrimental to go through what I went through, and yes, ma'am, I can't sit here and say why I didn't remember something. I wish I could. I just can't. At that time, I'm worried about telling my children how I'm going to tell them their sister's not going to wake up and she's going to die. I wasn't really worried about, I'm sorry, I was confused.
You lied to the cops about your daughter having cereal that morning also, isn't that correct? She didn't have any cereal.
I didn't see cereal in the house. Our normal routine in the morning, she does eat cereal.
So what you're saying is you gave a normal routine, not necessarily what happened. Is
I
that
thought-
what you're saying today?
I thought that she ate cereal.
And after March 8th, had you ever talked to your friend Chris?
Yes, ma'am.
What day did you next talk to him?
It was after I got out of the hospital, after Hannah had passed.
So after the 18th of March?
Yes, ma'am.
And is this a good friend of yours?
We're friends, yes, ma'am.
You indicate that you know him and he's moved to Lebanon since then, correct?
He moved in with his sister, yes, ma'am.
How many times have you seen Chris since March 18th of 2018?
Quite a bit,
Quite a bit.
yes, ma'am.
And you're leading us to believe that the first time he tells you that, hey, I was at your house and you drove me home, was the week trial starting? I'm sorry, the
That's not-
Sunday before trial?
That's not exactly how that came out like that. We were talking about Hannah, and we were talking about the last time he saw her, and he said he saw her the day before.
You're pretty vocal on Facebook, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And you make postings on Facebook, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
You're telling me that your friend Chris never responded back on Facebook, indicating about how he remembered the last night he saw Hannah?
No, ma'am. Chris doesn't have Facebook.
So you lied about the toys playing in the room, correct?
She didn't go in at 7 o'clock. Yes, ma'am.
And you're lying about that, correct?
She could have went in the room when we got back. We didn't stay. I took Chris home, so yes, ma'am. She did not go right in and play in her bedroom.
You never consented to a search of your computer, correct?
Nobody ever asked.
Prior to living at the 4004 Shank Road, you lived in Somerville, Ohio, is that correct?
For about a week.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Do you recall telling Lindsay Partin that you lived in Somerville, Ohio, in a house without electricity
Yes, ma'am.
in the summer, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
That you and Hannah lived in that house without electricity, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
You owed rent for your house at 4004 Shank Road at the time of this injury to Hannah, is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
You hadn't paid the month of March's rent, correct?
No, ma'am.
And you hadn't paid Lindsay for the babysitting, correct?
I'm not sure how far behind I was. I was behind a little bit on Lindsay. I'm not sure exactly how far behind I was, though.
And you were behind in payments on your car that you owed to Jay Smith also for the vehicle, is that correct?
No, ma'am.
You weren't?
I gave Jay $300 a week for my car. Every single week, I gave him $300 in cash. Every time I cashed my paycheck. So I gave him $1,200 a month. If it was a 5-week month, I gave him $1,500.
You knew you were on a short leash on the 7th of March from Smith Construction because of the issues with the trailer and the Mexican, correct?
Yes, ma'am. The
That's how you
trailer.
describe it, wouldn't you?
Yeah, the trailer. I knew I was on short leash with the trailer.
TJ had made it very clear to you that you were on a short leash, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And you couldn't afford to lose your job. Is that fair to say?
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Weshy, would you agree with me that you are a frequent user of the GoFundMe page system, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
That when Hannah was in your custody and care and when you had possession of her, that you had put out a GoFundMe page seeking donations to help raise her, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And then when Hannah was in the hospital, you created another GoFundMe page seeking donations, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And how much did you raise in that Hannah Strong campaign?
About $10,000.
And you spent that on yourself, correct?
No, ma'am. It paid for her funeral.
Did you do a 401c3?
A 401c. I have a 501c3 nonprofit organization. Yes, ma'am.
And is that the nonprofit organization that you want to start a camp for abused children?
Yes, ma'am.
And you're seeking donations in the amount of $785,000 to do so?
Yes, ma'am.
What's your education?
High school.
High school education.
Yes, ma'am.
And the house that we looked at, would the camp be similarly situated with the number of toys?
No, ma'am.
Jason, isn't it fair to say that you have come up with a new GoFundMe page? Correct?
After that one, I don't believe so.
You've sued Lindsay Partin, correct?
Yes, ma'am. We do have a civil suit. Yes, ma'am.
You filed that lawsuit just on the last day of the statute of limitations, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
But you actually went to see an attorney in the spring of 2018, isn't that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
O'Connor or Tony Levy, did you see them on the TV?
I'm not sure where I got the name from. It probably was TV. Yes, ma'am.
You retained them.
Yes, ma'am.
They opened a probate estate for you, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Just you, correct?
I haven't seen the lawsuit. I'm not really sure what's in it. I know it was opened before the statute ran out. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, and you knew that all along that was your plan to do, correct?
I knew we were going to civilly sue them. Yes, ma'am.
And that's because you think that the Smiths have money, correct?
I know the Smiths have money, but that's not why I'm suing Miss Parker.
That's your new GoFundMe page, correct?
No, it's not.
You believe that you are qualified to open a summer camp for children?
I believe my directors are. One of my directors for my corporation was a CASA advocate for the courts. So yes, ma'am, I believe that my directors are very well capable of doing it.
You're the president of that company, correct?
I am the president. Yes, ma'am.
What are your qualifications to be the president of a camp for abused children? What are you going to be able to do?
I don't have qualification personally. It's not something that I plan on running myself.
You had plans on using that money for yourself, isn't that correct?
No, ma'am.
Has Chris been to trial any one of these days?
No, ma'am.
But he's a good friend of yours?
Yes, ma'am.
You'd agree with me that on the 911 call, you're already at the house, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And you're there when the EMTs arrive, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And you're aware that the EMT indicated that you were disruptive? Do you recall that?
At the hospital, maybe. Yes, ma'am.
You wouldn't disagree with that?
I don't. No, I wouldn't. I was disruptive at the hospital. At the residence, I don't believe I was disruptive. No.
Do you recall the Smith family also responding to the house before the EMT and the deputy left?
I couldn't tell you who came. When they took her out, I got in my car and I left.
You recall seeing TJ Smith at the house?
No.
You don't?
No.
You recall seeing Jay Smith?
No.
You recall seeing Paula Smith?
No.
Mr. Weshy, you don't think that the detectives would have wanted to know that you had an overnight guest at your home and that he had contact with your child within the 24 hours of her injury?
I'm sure they would have, yes.
And you hid that, correct?
I wasn't trying to hide anything. I have nothing to hide whatsoever.
You or Lindsay or Chris now, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Lindsay was panicked in the telephone call to you, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Fair to say?
Yes, ma'am.
You heard the 911, have you heard the 911 call?
I listened to it last year, yes, ma'am.
Okay. And last year, when you listened to the 911 call, did you listen to any other recordings?
I don't believe so. I mean, as far as court goes, I watched it on the news every time we had a court case, but the 911 tape is all the recordings I listened to, I believe.
What day did you go see O'Connor, Johnny, and Levy?
I could not tell you.
If I told you that the coroner's investigative report indicates that they were trying to get the coroner's report in May of 2018, does that sound right?
It may have been May, yes.
Was it April?
No, it was not April.
1 second, please.
Sure.
Mr. Weshy, you'd agree with me that from the time of the EMT leaving the house to the time of March 9th, let's say 1 p.m., you've had multiple calls with Lindsay Partin, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And you've seen her for hours at Children's Hospital, correct?
I'm not sure how long she was there, but I don't think it was hours. She came towards the evening. Yes, I did see her at Children's
Let's go
Hospital.
back. So you saw her at Fort Hamilton Hospital, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And then she came down to the hospital, correct?
She came to Children's later on that evening.
Okay. And if I said that her records indicated that she was there from approximately 6 to 9 p.m., would you agree or disagree with that?
She may have been. I'm not sure. If her records indicate that, then I assume she was, but I'm not sure of the time frame on how long she was there and how long she wasn't.
And TJ Smith came down too, is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And you'd agree with me that she was there in the evening hours, correct?
It was the evening, yes,
So
ma'am.
this is after Hannah's had brain surgery performed by Dr. Stevenson, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And after you've spoken to Dr. Stevenson after the surgery, correct? About her condition?
Yes, ma'am.
And you sat with Lindsay for a period of time at the hospital, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Your daughter Caitlin also sat with Lindsay, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
You all prayed together, is that fair to say?
Yes, ma'am, we did.
And is that when you told her about the aneurysm?
Lindsay?
Yes.
No, that was my assumption. Nobody said aneurysm. When the EMTs took her, they told me it looked like she has blood on her brain. I assumed that she had an aneurysm. So when I called my father-in-law, my brother, and my daughter, that's what I told them, that she had an aneurysm. That's what I assumed. I didn't know it was abuse until the next day.
That's what you continued to tell Lindsay on the evening of the 8th down at
Yes.
Children's Hospital,
Yes,
correct?
ma'am, that's what I thought.
That it was an aneurysm.
That's what I thought.
That's even though Dr. Stevenson and other doctors are describing abuse instead?
Yes, they were saying.
You're aware of that, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
So you're aware before Lindsay Partin comes down in the evening of the 8th that the doctors are telling you abuse, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
But you're telling Lindsay Partin aneurysm, correct?
That's what I thought. Yes, ma'am.
So you're lying to Lindsay, correct?
I was telling her what I thought.
You're covering up the abuse, correct?
No, ma'am.
You're concealing the abuse, correct?
No, ma'am.
You're the one who told Lindsay about the torso bruises, isn't that correct?
No, ma'am.
You needed to cover up the fact that you had caused those, isn't that correct?
No, ma'am.
That your daughter Caitlin had seen one of those bruises over the weekend, isn't that correct?
No, ma'am.
You don't remember that?
I don't remember that.
You don't remember that she told the detectives that?
That she had bruises?
Yes.
She may have said she had bruises. I'm not sure. Not on a torso, no. I don't believe that she said anything about those bruises because those came from the rocks.
You've had
from what I
multiple
was told.
conversations with your daughter Caitlin about that?
I have conversations with my daughter all the time, yes, ma'am.
And your testimony here is that you're being told by the doctor's abuse, but you continue to tell Lindsay aneurysm, correct?
I thought it was an aneurysm, yes, ma'am.
Despite what the doctors are telling you,
Yes,
correct?
yes, because at the time I did not think it
No
was
further
abuse.
questions, thank you.
Counsel, approach, please. Folks, it is just about noon on the dot. I'm going to go ahead and give you an hour for lunch. Mr. West, you're still under oath, and you're still under the admonition you cannot discuss the case with anybody. Folks, leave your notepads and your pens, keep your lanyards on, remember your admonitions. Congregate outside about 1 o'clock, and we will get started with redirect and finish the witness up when we return, okay? All right.